Do we have Josh? There you are. Great.
Matthew, what's your first sports memory?
My first sports memory would probably be the 2000 World Series with Arizona and the Yankees. I think that was the first moment in my life that I actually realized how much baseball meant to me. I actually realized how much sports was going to have an impact in my life. I can actually remember the moment. I was actually sitting in my television room. I was actually by myself. I'm actually one of the few people in my family who actually has a passion for sports and follows sports and things like that. So I remember sitting there and watching just the entire game just fall apart in the ninth inning, and I was actually in shock. I remember sitting there with my mouth dropped, trying to figure out what just happened, and that's the first memory in my head when I go back and I think when sports first began to have an impact in my life. So that's the moment that I can first think of.
My first sports memory is Game 1 of the 2000 World Series, Yankees-Mets. I'm a Mets fan, and just watching Armando Benitez blow that game in that ninth inning, and just everything that happened before with Todd Zeile not running as hard as he could to score earlier in that game. It was then when I think I knew that as a Mets fan, I would always be second fiddle to the Yankees, and it's kind of followed that way from there. So that's my first unfortunate sports memory for me.
All right, we'll stick with the theme of your youth. Obviously, you guys are interested in a career in broadcasting, or you wouldn't be here. At what age did you say to yourself, you know what, I'd like to do this for a living? Josh, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, when I was in high school, I did a lot of plays, and even before that, I was always a person who liked to talk a lot, and I always spoke very loudly, and I always felt I was a good orator. So all my acting in high school that I did, I thought that would be conducive to being in broadcasting, and I think I'm very good at just communicating my points and talking about what it is that I'm interested in.
I just want to correct myself. I actually said the 2000 World Series. I meant the 2001 World Series in my last answer. But in terms of when I first wanted to start doing this, I was actually 11 years old. I went to my first New York Knicks game, and I looked up, and there was a sign that said WFAN. I had no idea what that was. I had never heard of sports radio before. I went home, I turned it on, and since I was 11 years old, I've fallen asleep every single night listening to the fan. So from there, I developed a love for radio. I developed a love for communications. At 16, I began looking into it, and I just realized that this is what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. It's communicating with people. It's talking to people. It's the ability to always learn something from someone else. It's the ability to give people an outlet on radio to be able to express themselves. What people always don't realize is that sports radio is a way for people to escape problems that they may be having in their life, and to actually have the opportunity to be a part of that would be something that would absolutely be a lot to me. And that's something that I've felt since I was a little kid.
Okay, let's do Josh first.
Sure.
If you could speak to one athlete, who would the athlete be, and what is the one, you're allowed one question. What's the one question you're going to ask that person?
I would speak to Peyton Manning, and I would ask him, how does it feel that throughout your whole career, you've sort of been underrated? I mean, yes, you have all those accolades, but you've never been put quite on a pedestal, and I always feel like for you, Peyton, you've had a great career, but you haven't had that Tom Brady championship career, even though you have a Super Bowl. So I would really want to get in his head and see how he feels about the media's perception of him not being quite the player that Tom Brady is.
I know he's already been mentioned tonight, but the person that I would want to ask the one question to is Alex Rodriguez. And the one question I would want to ask him is if he truly understands how he was perceived by the general public in light of how he acted, in terms of his pictures in Central Park, in terms of him accepting that contract, in terms of him opting out in the middle of the World Series. I would want to know if he truly understood that it didn't quite make sense. It wasn't really logical. And I would see how he expanded off of that answer, and if he would truly show a different side of him that he hasn't shown previously in interviews and in conversations.
All right, it's time for the monologues. Justin, if you could step aside.
Okay.
Matthew, you're up first. 2 minutes on the clock.
Sounds good.
Go for it.
All right. So a few weeks ago, Bert Blyleven and Roberto Alomar were inducted into baseball's Hall of Fame. So congratulations to them on that. That's a good, thing for them for their career, and they should be honored for that. Derek Jeter was, of course, chasing his 3,000th hit. So the conversations were abound about the Hall of Fame and things of that nature. And what it did is it reminded me of something that truly bothers me at my sports core. And that's Baseball Hall of Fame and the whole first ballot nonsense. I actually read something on Jay Mariotti's blog, and he said that first ballot is reserved for those that are the best of the best. Now look, no offense to Jay Mariotti or anything, But I was under the assumption that baseball's Hall of Fame is what was reserved for the best of the best. You know, writers have gotten to the point now, when they vote for the Hall of Fame, they're voting based upon an individual's personality, or they're voting based upon an individual's strength of the ballot and who's on it this time and who's not. When in actuality, we need to be voting based upon the individual's own personal sports achievements when it comes to baseball. I'm trying to figure out, what is the point of voting no the first time, and then a few years later deciding, you know what, I think I'm gonna vote yes now. It's illogical. What is your goal? Are you attempting to humble them up? I have bad news for you. You're attempting to humble someone up who's sitting on their beachfront house, 5 convertibles in the driveway, a $5,000 lazy boy chair sipping on a Mai Tai. We've got to get to the point where we're honoring the history of this game and allowing for the next generation of baseball fans to have an accurate representation of how we've gotten to where we are in this sport, by voting and electing people into the Hall of Fame that truly have the stats and the personal achievements, and not necessarily those who are being voted in simply because it's their last time on the ballot. Matt Evans, Sports Radio 66, WFAN, New York.
All right, so on the theme of the Hall of Fame, and I guess you're talking about really on their achievements on the field and stuff.
Yeah.
Pete Rose be in the Hall of Fame?
Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I kind of take the Pete Rose situation, and it reminds me of the A-Rod poker situation that's going on now. And I think to myself, look, I understand what Pete Rose did was wrong. I'm not trying to defend his actions in any way, shape, or form. But the fact of the matter is, his statistics warrant him the right to be honored. What worries me is that a few generations down the road, will my children or my children's children truly know who Pete Rose was and how great he was as a player? That worries me that they may not, simply because he's not in the Hall of Fame based upon a mistake that he's made that he's actually owned up to. And that worries me a little bit. So yes, I do think Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame.
And just to add on to that, how about the steroid era guys? McGuire, Clemens, so on, Sosa, players like that.
I think that's a little bit dicier. That's getting a little bit more controversial, but I still argue that they should be given equal consideration based upon their numbers. I think what you can do is that when you induct them into the Hall of Fame, there's a plaque that explains it. I think it needs to be understood for future generations of baseball fans that there was an era in this sport that was not the cleanest era in the world, and that if you educate the next generation of fans on that, I think if you induct them into the Hall of Fame, that they're going to be able to make that decision on their own as to whether or not they truly deserve to be there. But on their numbers, I do think they should be there, yes.
All right, let's switch over to football. If you're Jets general manager Mike Tannenbaum, what's keeping you up at night? How worried about the upcoming season?
My quarterback. What's going to keep me up at night is whether or not Mark Sanchez is going to be able to elevate his game to the point that he needs to in his 3rd season as a quarterback. Look, Tannenbaum's setting him up well. Tannenbaum is setting him up to be able to increase his pass completion in the red zone. He's giving him Plaxico Burress. You got a 6'5" target out there. You no longer have an excuse as to why you can't complete your passes. You no longer have an excuse as to why you can't get the touchdown when you need it. So what's keeping me up at night is whether or not Sanchez can move along and continue to make the progress and eventually live up to the hype that he had coming into this league.
As far as the Giants go, what are the 3 biggest concerns if you're Jerry Reese?
My number 1 concern is motivation. I would worry whether or not my players are truly motivated enough to succeed this season. I would worry about my coach. I think Tom Coughlin is no longer the best person to lead this team forward. And I would also begin to think about Eli Manning and whether Eli Manning can continue to maintain his level of play and whether or not he would get injured this season.
All right, there's a Mets debate about what to do with the bullpen the rest of the season. What are your feelings about the Mets bullpen and how they should handle the guys?
I think at this point what the Mets need to do is they need to look in their minor league system and see what they've got working down there. I mean, I'm not well versed on the Mets minor league system, but what I can tell you is what they have on the major league roster isn't going to work for them. You know, they also have to decide if at this point in the season, are they going to try and make a run for the wild card? Or are they going to actually say that their season is done? They have to figure out what they're going to do in terms of their season, and I don't think they know. And I think that's part of the Mets' problem. There's a lack of vision for this team going forward. There's a lack of vision for this team within the next week. So I think in terms of the bullpen, I would see what young players I have that I would be willing to give a chance to and see where it is that they may go and prime myself for next season.
Give us a quick World Series prediction.
People are going to think I'm crazy on this one, but I'm actually going to say Yankees-Phillies. I actually do believe that the Yankees are going to have enough to get them through. I think it's going to shock literally anyone and everyone who watches baseball that the Yankees actually will make the World Series, and I actually do think they'll win it. I think what you're going to see is you're going to see consistency from here on forward from Freddie Garcia. I think Freddie Garcia is really going to be able to up his game as you get closer into the playoffs. I think they're going to have just enough. I don't think they're going to blow out any team. I don't think they're going to sweep any series, but I do think they'll have enough to meet the Phillies in October and take home another World Series title.
All right, Matthew.
All right, thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it.
Josh, you're on the clock.
So I know it's an important year for Tom Coughlin. His Giants missed the playoffs the last 2 years, and he's got to make it this year. But why isn't it a bigger year for Jerry Reese? How come nobody talks about this guy? I mean, I know Jerry Reese, untouchable Jerry Reese, won the Super Bowl in his first season. But, hey, who really put that team together? That was Ernie Accorsi's team. He put together that nucleus. I know, I'll give Reese credit. He drafted Steve Smith. He drafted Kevin Boss. And he drafted Aaron Ross. All those guys contributed in that Super Bowl win in that game. But now we got to know, can Jerry Reese from here on out put together the core of a team like Ernie Accorsi was able to put together that core? So far, it's not good. I mean, especially the main competition of this division, it's always going to be the Eagles. Last 10 years, Eagles have owned this division. In fact, it just seems like the Giants' Super Bowl win was a 4-week fluke where the football gods were smiling on them. That's just the way it seems to me. I mean, you look at this offseason, I don't have to tell you guys the names. You know who they signed: Asamoah, Rogers Cromartie, Ronnie Brown, Cullen Jenkins. That widens the gap between the Eagles and the Giants. When you're a second-place team, you got to close that gap between the first-place team and yourself. But the gap is totally widened, and you know, it's so unfair to Tom Coughlin. He's the constant. He's been there since '04. He brings a resume. Why does he always take the heat? How come the guys who built this team don't get the heat? Ernie Accorsi didn't think this team could win with Coughlin, but look what, the year he left, they turned around and he did. I don't think the Giants are going to have a good year. I don't say how you could objectively say that right now, but if they don't, and Coughlin goes, I think Mr. Mara should also take a look at his general manager. Thank you.
All right. Tom Coughlin, Rex Ryan. Who's the better coach and why?
Right now, I'm a Giants fan, but it's Rex Ryan. It's Rex Ryan because, first of all, he's been to the last 2 AFC Championship games, number one. Number two, I think he's a genius in the sense that he deflects attention away from his players so they don't have any distractions, and he absorbs all those distractions. I think that's an underrated part of being a coach. And I think more than anything, that's why players like to play for Rex Ryan, because they know he's going to talk to the media, he's going to deal with them, and he's going to take the attention away from them. So right now, even though Tom Coughlin has a Super Bowl, Rex Ryan has had a better start to his Jets career than Tom Coughlin to his Giants.
Let's talk about baseball and
Sure.
2 managers in New York. Forgetting about what the talent is on each team.
Sure.
Who's the better manager, Joe Girardi or Terry Collins?
Terry Collins, without a doubt. I mean, you know, you just look at the way the team is playing right now, and that he is them playing so much better than anybody else expected. Joe Girardi walked into a ready-made situation, especially that '09 season when, you know, he had Sabathia and Burnett had a good year and that amazing lineup. I mean, Terry Collins actually has to do work to manage that team. I'm not trying to take anything away from Joe Girardi, but Terry Collins really has to do work to get that team playing, and I don't think Joe Girardi has to do as much.
Daniel Murphy, where does he fit into the Mets' future?
If he has to learn how to play left field, that's about it, because Ike Davis is going to be the Mets' first baseman. I don't think Daniel Murphy can play second base. Number one, and we know he can't play shortstop. You know, maybe he can back up at third base, but in order to stay with the Mets, he needs a position to play in the National League. It's got to be a corner outfield spot, either left field or right field. Good hitter, very good hitter. Not so much power, but good in the clutch, and he has to learn how to play an outfield spot.
All right, Josh, thank you very much.
Thank you.